So it's so good to be back with you this morning. I'm feeling a little bit nervous because it's been a while since I've spoken in front of this many people, but I'm just really excited to come and share the message with you today. And today we're actually going to unpack the story of Peter. So Peter, if you don't know who I'm talking about, are there any Peters? I can see one Peter in the room, but we're not talking about Peter Jones. We are talking about Peter in the Bible, and he is one of Jesus's disciples. And I'm not going to say that Jesus had favorites, but Jesus did have some disciples who were closer to him, that he revealed more, that he sort of gave more responsibility and leadership to. And Peter was one of the three disciples that Jesus chose to walk really close with him. And so we're going to look at the story of Peter and continue our series called Unqualified. Have you guys been enjoying the series? Yeah, have people been spoken to in the series? Can I see any hands? Anyone been able to take away some things? I think it's been an awesome series. And today I have got a little, has anyone noticed the little bits of paper that might be on their seats? There's some pens that are with them. And on the front you'll see it says, what is one thing that God is saying to me today? And for those of you that remembered, when I used to speak, something that I would often do is I would send you home with a take-home message, or one thing to remember from the message today. But something that God put on my heart is that, we are all going through different things, that we're all different places and different spaces. And I think that the one thing that God might want to say to you today might be different to the one thing that God wants to say to the person who's sitting next to you. And so at the end of the message, I'm just going to give you a quick minute to reflect on what we've spoken about today. And I actually want you to take that time to write down what is the one thing that you think that God is saying to you today. And so on the blank side, I want to encourage you to take some notes. As I'm speaking, if there's something that stands out to your soul, that you might write it down. There might be a Bible passage or something that's said, or it could be something completely different. My son Jonah went to youth group a couple of weeks ago, and he had this amazing, really spiritual encounter with Jesus. And he came home, and he's my son because he spoke for an hour and 15 minutes straight. He's feeling a bit embarrassed. Don't worry, Jonah, you get it from me. And he said all these things that God revealed to him at youth group, which isn't that cool? Right, my child went to our youth group on Friday night and he met Jesus, right? So he said a lot of cool things, but one of the things that I loved is he said, the leaders were talking about this thing, but God said to me, Jonah, I want to say something different to you today. And then he took me off on a tangent. And so I want to give you permission that if God has a tangent for you to go on today, feel free to drown me out. Right? You can stop listening to me and you can start listening to God, right? As Judy said, it is God who is preaching today. And I believe that I could be saying one thing and God could be saying a completely different thing to you this morning. And so I just really hope and pray that for each of us, that there is one thing that God is saying to us. Well, actually, I know, right? I know that there is one thing that God is saying to us. And my prayer is that you'll be able to hear that this morning. All right. So let me do a quick survey. Put your hand up if you're under 25. Are there some under 25s in the room? Okay. Now, when I did this message at Austral, I said you might not be able to relate to this story because I didn't think this kind of thing happened anymore. But my son, Kalen, told me, actually, no, this still does happen. But if you are under 25 and this has never happened to you, I just want you to imagine. But for those of you who are over 25, I wonder, have you been in a sports lessons before? And the teacher needed to break the class into two teams. And so for some reason, breaking the class into two teams was a very big effort. And so rather than the teacher breaking the class into two teams, they chose two captains. Anyone know where I'm going with this? Right? So they chose two captains. And what would happen is the first captain would choose the next student to be in their team. And so that captain's thinking, okay, who is, just say they're playing volleyball, who is best at volleyball? That is who I'm going to choose first on my team. Right? And then the next captain, they get to choose next, and they scan the leftovers, the remains, and go, well, who's the next person? Who's the next best person? I'm going to choose them to be on their team. And I wonder if you remember what it was like being the student that was waiting to be picked. Yeah? I wonder if you remember what it was like to feel that anxiety of, am I going to be picked next? And please, God, Do not let me get picked last because, that is just the worst, right? And so the reason why I wanted to bring up, I hope I'm not bringing up trauma for anyone here. If anyone needs to debrief afterwards, come and speak to me. I wasn't picked first. My husband, he was the one that would always get picked first. But I remember that feeling of that anxiety of, will I be picked? But the reason why I shared this experience with you is as I read through the story of Peter, I could sort of see this pattern emerging, right? And it's like Peter had this belief that he thought Jesus was choosing his team based on performance. Right, that Jesus was choosing his disciples, his teams, his followers based on performance. Sometimes in Peter's false belief being played out of when I succeed, I'm in. But the flip of that is when I fail, I'm out. Right? When I succeed, I'm in. God's picked me, I'm on his team. But when I fail, I'm out. And so today we are going to look at 5 different scenes throughout the Gospels. And so if you're new at church and you're not sure what the Gospels are, I'm talking about the first 4 books of the New Testament. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And these 4 books are a witness account of Jesus' life. And so I'm going to pull out 5 different scenes across these 4 books. Because, like I said, Peter was one of Jesus' closest disciples. So he appeared a lot. And so I thought we probably don't have enough time to talk about everything. So I just want to talk about these 5 scenes. And as I read through the 5 scenes, I wonder if you could listen for, right? If you could listen for when Peter has this attitude or this belief of, I was good. I was good, so I am good, and it means that I'm in. And the flip side of that, if you can hear the times where you might hear Peter say, well, I did bad. I didn't do good. So maybe I am bad and maybe I'm out. And so we're going to start right at scene 1. And scene 1 is the beginning of Jesus's and Peter's relationship. And it's from Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 to 20. And it says this: as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once, they left their nets and followed him. Scene 2. Now we're fast forwarding a little bit to when Peter and Jesus have their relationship a little bit more established. And Jesus is actually making a point of how Peter has a special role. And in Matthew 16, we see Peter both encouraged and rebuked by Jesus. In chapter 18, this is what it says: and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Right? You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. That's a pretty big encouragement, right? Yeah, would anyone be happy if Jesus said that to them? Yeah, that's a massive encouragement that Jesus is giving. And then Jesus goes on to talk about how he's actually going to be crucified. And Peter's like, whoa, wait. No. No, Jesus, that's not going to happen. And so 5 verses later, after Jesus has said, you are the rock on which I will build my church, right? This is what Jesus then says. Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. That wouldn't have been as nice to hear, would it? And now let's go to scene 3. Fast forward to Matthew 26. And in this scene, Peter actually talks about how Peter is going to deny Jesus. And so Matthew 26, verse 31, Jesus actually tells Peter, he says, Peter, you are going to deny me. You are going to say you don't know me. You are not my friend. You are not my follower. And it's actually going to be in one of the hardest times of my life. It's actually in the hardest time of my life that you are going to deny me. Right? And Peter responds, right? Once again, do you think he believed Jesus? Went, well, you're Jesus. Maybe you're right. No. He goes, no. In verse 33, he says, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. And 35, he says, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. He's saying, Jesus, you know what? You think I'm going to leave you, but I will never do that. I will perform for you. I will do what's right by you. I will not fail you. I will be there for you. Peter was confident in this. But then when we look to verse 69, we see in fact that Peter does disown Jesus. He does say, oh no, Jesus, I don't know him. Oh no, I'm not his follower. I'm not his friend. And he doesn't say it once, but he says it 3 times. And then when Peter has this light bulb moment of what he realized what he's just done, the Bible says that Peter wept bitterly. And the Message paraphrase says, he cried and he cried and he cried. And then the next scene, scene 4, after Jesus had died and now he's come back to life, but the disciples are in this little bit of limbo land of what do we do now? I'm not sure what I'm meant to do. I'm not sure where I'm meant to be. And we find Peter in John chapter 21. He goes fishing. In verse 3, it says, I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, well, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, on the shore, but the disciples didn't realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw out your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. And then in verse 7, it says, as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him and jumped into the water. Does anyone think that's weird? That he put on clothes before he jumped into the water? We'll come back to that a little bit later, but let's just note that that's weird. And Jesus said to them, bring some fish that you have just caught. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. But even with so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. And that takes us to scene 5. I called it breakfast on the beach. Verses 15 to 18, we see this conversation play out between Jesus and Peter. And Jesus asked Peter 3 times, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? And Peter answered, this is me paraphrasing, by the way. Peter answered 3 times, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then in verse 19, Peter gets this invitation again. The very same invitation that Jesus offered him right at the beginning. Jesus says, follow me. Follow me. And so I'm wondering for you that as we look at God's word and as we read through that story, I'm wondering if anything is standing out for you. And so I just want to take some time to let you know what stood out for me that as I reflected through these passages in the weeks leading up to this message. You know, in the first scene, I thought this was important because I thought it was just such a simple act of obedience and sacrifice. Jesus said, follow me. And it just says that Peter and his brother left their net and they followed Jesus. It was just so simple and it was just so beautiful. And it reminds me of what you might experience between like a parent and a child or a mother and a child right at birth. You see, I've just had Lily. And, you know, Lily just looks at me like she just loves me so much. And it really doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what she does. She just knows that I love her. And she knows that she's my daughter. Right? She's just learning to walk. And I'm pretty sure the thoughts aren't going through her head is like, wow, look, I'm walking. My mum will love me more now. I don't think that's what she's thinking. Right? She just knows that I love her. And she has this trust. And I see this in the start with Peter and Jesus, that there's just this trust and this knowing that Peter just knows that he is loved. And Peter just knows that he has been called. And so I wonder if there's anyone here that needs to be invited back to that first love, needs to be invited back into that first space. Do you know that Jesus loves you? Do you know that Jesus calls you? Right, Peter hadn't done anything for Jesus. Peter hadn't done anything cool, anything amazing, anything outstanding, but Jesus chose him. I wonder if you are being invited back to that first love space with Jesus this morning. But for any of us that have been in relationships, we know that it's hard to stay in that first love space. If we've figured out the secret, come tell me. Right? Because it's hard to stay in that space of remembering that you were loved. And Peter found it hard to stay in this space too. And so in scene 2, we see this play out of how Peter is encouraged and then Peter is rebuked. And as I read through this story, I felt like you could see Peter go, oh, like I'm the rock on which Jesus is going to build the church. That's cool. Wow, Jesus is impressed with me. I must have done well. And then Peter just keeps on going to the point where he actually sort of starts running ahead of Jesus. Right? He actually gets to the point where he corrects Jesus. Right? He corrects Jesus. He says, Jesus, no, you're wrong. That's not going to happen. I'm right. This isn't going to happen. And I wonder if you've ever done that. I wonder if you've ever run ahead of Jesus. I wonder if you've ever run ahead of Jesus. In the Message paraphrase, the subheading for this passage actually says, you are not in the driver's seat. You are not in the driver's seat. And so I wonder if there's anyone here that needs to hear the rebuke. And I'm going to read it from the Message paraphrase, and this is what it says. It says, anyone who intends to come with me, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You are not in the driver's seat. I am. You see, I remember hearing these words being whispered to me. I remember driving down Appin Road. Sort of, it's this nice place you get in between like Campbelltown and Appin, and like the hills come out and the sun was there. And I remember Jesus whispering to me, saying, Rachel, you are not in the driver's seat. You're trying to be. You're trying to be, but you're not. And he was like, let me lead. Let me lead. And so I wonder if for anyone here, if maybe that's what God's whispering to you today. You see, when Peter performed well, he had this inclination, like me, to run ahead of Jesus. But I wonder what happens when he performs not so well. Where does he run then? And in scene 3, what we see being unpacked, right? Jesus predicts that Peter will deny him, and Peter doesn't believe. And once again, he corrects Jesus. I just think that's funny, right? But I guess we probably do it too, right? But he corrects Jesus. No, Jesus, you don't have it right. Let me tell you how it happens, how it's going to happen. He's like, no, I will not disown you. I will stand by you. I will be with you. I am your follower. I am your disciple. Don't you remember? I'm the rock on which you're going to build the church. I'm not going to let you down. But he does, right? Peter fails. Peter denies Jesus. Peter turns his back on Jesus at his greatest, darkest hour. Peter failed Jesus. And it's like when Peter failed Jesus, he disqualified himself. Right? He's performed badly. I'm not in anymore. I'm out. I'm out of Jesus' team. He goes from being overqualified and running ahead of Jesus to being disqualified and running away from Jesus. And I wonder if this sounds familiar to you. When I fail, I run away. When I fail, I run away. And I'm not sure, as I was writing this passage, I didn't actually even say this at Austral, but as I was reflecting on the message, this is what came to me, is that I don't know who needs to hear this today, but I know that there's at least one person in the room who needs to hear this. Did you know that Jesus is waiting for you with open arms when you fail? I don't know if you're familiar with the story of the prodigal son, right? But it's this son who does everything almost imaginably possible to disappoint his father. He sleeps with prostitutes, he wastes his money, he, just follows, all the worldly ways. Whatever you could do wrong, it's like he did wrong. And then when he realizes that, I'm a bit screwed without my dad, I better go back to him with his tail behind underneath his legs. And he thought, maybe I'll just be a servant in my dad's home. And as he goes back to his father, expecting that kind of welcome, he actually notices his father afar. And his dad runs to him. His dad runs to him and wraps his arms around him. And did you know that Jesus is running to you? Right? You might be running away, but he is running to you and his arms are open. And there is nothing that you can do. There is no major fail that you could do that would make Jesus turn away. Right? Jesus will never turn away from you. He is waiting for you with open arms. He's waiting for you with open arms. But Peter, at this moment, at this part of the story, he was still running away. And as we look into scene 4, we actually see where he was running to. Right? Does anyone remember in scene 4 where he goes? Where we find him? Fishing. He was fishing. You see, his failure led him back to his familiar. Right? His failure led him back to his familiar. And I wonder, maybe, does that happen to us? Do we ever find that when we fail, that we are led back to what is familiar to us? Right? When I feel like Jesus, I'm led back to working hard to earn my worth. Do you know it's so easy for me to do that? Like, this is me, I'm talking about me. It's so easy for me to feel like I need to work to earn work to earn my worth. It's almost like my default setting. It's my familiar. And so when I doubt myself and when I doubt Jesus and his calling on my life, I go back to working. So that's my familiar, but I don't know what your familiar is. But I wonder, what is your familiar that maybe you turn back to? I wonder, is it resentment? Is it resentment because it feels so much better to feel angry at the world than to be vulnerable? I wonder, is it spending time on the way you look and spending money on the way you look because when you feel like when I look good, well, then I'm worthy and I'm valuable? I wonder, is it an unhealthy relationship that you find yourself keep going back to and back to and back to? Because, well, it feels familiar and I'm a failure, so that's where I'll run to. Or I wonder, is it social media or scrolling through your phone? Or is it drugs or alcohol or pornography? There's so many things that we can be tempted to run back to. But did you take note of what was happening to Peter and his fishing nets when he went back? They were empty. They were empty. You see, if we let our failure lead us back to what's familiar, our net will be empty. Right? Our soul, our heart, our life, it will feel empty because we know Jesus' love. Right? We know what it's like to feel called, to trust in the fact that no matter what we do, that we are loved and nothing in this world will compare to that. And so let me tell you, time and time again, every time I've ran back to what was familiar to me and I've tried to work my little butt off to feel good about myself, there is an emptiness that I feel. There is an emptiness that I feel. And you know what? I'm going to keep feeling that until I acknowledge Jesus on the beach calling out to me saying, I'm here, Rachel. I am here. You see, I love that Jesus came to find Peter that morning. Right? Peter wasn't out there looking for Jesus. Peter was fishing. Peter was trying to find some fish because that's going to make you happy, right? He was out fishing. I know, no offense to anyone that finds fishing happy. I'm sure that's many people's happy spaces. Right? But Jesus came to find Peter. You see, Jesus wants to use you right where you are, just as you are. Right? Jesus will come and find you, and he will use you right where you are, just as you are. And you see, I still think that Peter's struggling with this idea. I want to come back to where he put on his garment and then jumped in the water, right? So weird, right? Because don't we teach our kids in swimming lessons, you know, that whole, when you wear clothes, it'll make you drown. So I think at swimming lessons, like they actually chuck kids in with all their clothes on to show them, you know, you can't swim efficiently when you have clothes on, right? So it doesn't make sense that Peter would put that garment on. But as I read a little bit about this, is that back when Jesus was around, is that a greeting was considered a religious act. And so what I'm assuming, right, what I'm assuming is that out of respect, Peter covered himself before he went and met Jesus on the beach. Right, but I wonder, was Peter still trying to hide? Right, was Peter still trying to hide and cover up? He didn't want to show Jesus his dirty, worn out, smelly, gross fishing clothes. I wonder if he doubted, would Jesus still accept him? Would Jesus still love him? But I want you to imagine, what do you think Jesus would have done if Peter forgot the garment, right? If Peter just forgot the garment and was like, oh my gosh, it's Jesus. And so he jumped into the water and he swam over to him. Could anyone imagine Jesus sticking up his nose and going, oh, sorry, Peter, cover up, put on your garment? Can anyone? No. But isn't that the lie that we believe? Right? Isn't that the lie that we believe? And sometimes as church we play out, right? That, you know, let's put on our church clothes for Sunday. We need to be presentable and respectable, and all those failures that I did throughout the week, let's just cover them up. Let's just hide those away. Jesus does not care. Jesus sees you. He sees through you. He sees through the garments, and he actually notices the stink that you have, right? But he still came down to save you. He still loves you. He still accepts you. He still has his arms open up to you. Church, I just wish and hope and pray that we get better at this, that we know this better of ourselves so that we can be an open arm to everybody who walks into this door. Right? That we know that we can show up to Jesus just as we are, failures and all, as his children, right? As his baby, that just know that we are loved, that we are adored, that we are called, that we are chosen. And the beauty is that as we live out of that space, then we can become the open arms to everybody that walks in the door. That when somebody walks in with, dirty fishing clothes, we don't shrink back, but we say, you are accepted and you are welcomed. Beyond that, you are called, you are chosen, you are worthy, you are loved. You see, Jesus, he's not about performance. He's about grace. Right? And if he is our captain, if he is your captain, you never have to feel that anxiety of, will I be picked? You never have to feel that anxiety of, am I good enough? Will I be chosen? Jesus is not about performance. He is all about grace. And in Ephesians, there's a passage, and it's one of my favorites. I'm going to read it from the Message paraphrase again, that says, saving is all his idea and all his work. All you need to do is trust him enough to let him do it. It's God's gift from start to finish. You see, Peter had this invitation from Jesus, follow me. Follow me. And then after all was said and done and the highs and lows of Peter's journey with Jesus, Jesus invited him back into this space of follow me. And there is that simple act, that simple invitation that is offered to us today. Will we follow Jesus?